Hi everyone, welcome back to Unraveling Politics. This is our second episode. Thank you for joining. I'm super excited that you decided to come back and to take a look at the show. And if this is your first episode, I highly recommend you go back and watch the previous one where we talked about some very important things. Alright, so let's get into the news of the past week. So I got a list here. The stories I want to cover are Michael Cohen's testimony I want to mention that there's going to be some presidential debates. We got some debate dates. We also have an inflation report, and I want to talk about some of the primaries. Even though the primary is over, there's some important things we can glean from that. And also the Bob Menendez trial of the corruption trial of New Jersey Senator Bob Menendez. Okay, so let's start with Michael Cohen's testimony. Let me pull this up here. He said some very interesting things on the stand. Notably, Trump was very alert. He was Trump has been really asleep most of the trial, literally and figuratively. Like Trump was kind of falling asleep and maybe even farting a little bit, according to the journalists. So that's going to be I guess we shouldn't be hearing any more about Sleepy Joe. I guess we have Sleepy Joe and Sleepy Don. So Trump was alert. The defense tried to play him off as Michael Cohen off as a vengeful liar who is trying to destroy and bring down Donald Trump. And there is proof of that, because on a podcast a couple of years ago, Michael Cohen said he wanted Trump to go down for everything that he did to his family. So it's very, obviously he's a little bit biased, of course. So Michael Cohen, the defense tried to put him as a vengeful liar, and he's also the only witness to have spoken to Trump. And Trump's lawyers, of course, tried to pick the story apart. So there are phone records. So these are records. This is true. There are phone records that Trump and Cohen did speak at the end of October in 2016, right before the election. So one call that the lawyers honed in on was 1 minute and 36 seconds. So it was only 96 seconds long. Cohen said it was about the securement to porn star Stormy Daniels. Todd Blanche, who I believe his name is Todd, I know his last name is Blanche, Trump's lawyer said that he had called to complain about prank calls. Cohen then said it was both. It was both the prank calls and it was about the payment. However, this was only 96 seconds long. So you can see, how can you talk about those two things in just a minute and a half? That's a little bit suspicious. That's kind of why I think this is a very weak case. If I was on the jury, I would seriously consider acquitting, because I don't think there's quite enough evidence to convict. I'm not saying Trump is innocent, but I am saying that there is very little evidence against this. And if Trump is acquitted, then he's probably going to receive a poll bounce, and he might actually win the election. This is probably a good thing for Trump to have this trial now rather than later in the year, because we're kind of in a down season right now. Not a lot of people are really thinking too much about politics. They're not super tuned in. But if this was happening in September or October, then this would probably be way, way, way more damaging for President Trump. So, as for the rest of the trial, Cohen is going to stand on Monday, which is today, and so far there are going to be no witnesses for the defense. Maybe Trump will come up, but if Trump is not going to be a witness, which if he was, he'll probably come in on Tuesday or Wednesday. And if he's not going to be a witness, then there will be closing arguments on Tuesday, and this trial could end this week. And then next week we probably won't have a resolution next week for our next week's episode, but we might have the trial be over and the jury will be deliberating, and that could take a couple of days. Usually the longer it takes, the more likely it is to acquit. I have a feeling this is going to be a long jury. It's going to take a while, but who knows. All right, next I want to talk about, this is more about elections. Now, elections have always been what has gotten me interested into politics. I want to take a look at some of the presidential primaries that happened on Tuesday last week. Now, you might think the primary is over. What's the big deal with the primary? It's important for protest votes. So, Nikki Haley in Indiana received 22% of the vote. She received almost 30% of the vote in the D.C. suburbs. Now, you might think they're not swing states, not a big deal. Okay, but you have to remember that there are even just a little bit of voters can sway the election. So if there are people who don't like Trump, who are Republicans, and they're voting for Nikki Haley instead of Trump as a protest vote, then that could be a concern for the election. I'm not saying 22% of Haley voters won't vote for Trump, but it wouldn't be surprising if 5 to 10% of them don't, maybe even a little bit more. And this is not really a problem we see as much on the Democratic side. Biden in Maryland received over 90% of the vote. And then in Nebraska, 2nd congressional district, which is its own electoral vote. And let me tell you, this election could come down to one electoral vote in Nebraska, because Nebraska separates their electoral votes by congressional district. Haley got 23% of the vote, and Biden's challengers got less than 10% of the vote. So that's probably a consequence of Dean Phillips not being as well known of a name as Nikki Haley. Most people in the country know who Nikki Haley is, but very few people know who Dean Phillips is. Dean Phillips is a congressman from Minnesota. He was running against Donald Trump, or against Joe Biden in the primary. So it is that might be a consequence of that. But my takeaway from this is I think that there is a deep division in the Republican Party, and if this division is not healed, then it's possible that that the vote will be split and that Biden may win. So I know I just said Trump may win, but I do think that Biden has the edge in this presidential race because of the deeply divided primary that just happened. Even though it ended quickly, the people who do not support Trump are probably not going to support him in the general election. So that is something one of my friends at school and we talk about all the time. That's probably the most, we have our different reasons why we think Biden is going to win. That's probably my reason. I'm not exactly sure what his are, but we both have some very good reasons. So at this point, I would put my money on Joe Biden winning the election. That is, if he's not dead. So who knows? I also wanted to mention that there has been rumors floating around that, what's his name? It's the Florida Senator, Marco Rubio, is running, or is going to be the vice presidential pick. Obviously, we don't know, and we're not going to know probably until July or August, whenever the convention is. I think the convention is sometime around there. So if he is the pick, he would have to move out of Florida, because you can't have, or Trump would have to move out of Florida, because you can't have two presidential candidates from the same state, or two presidential and vice presidential candidate from the same state. Otherwise, the electoral votes don't count. That's in our Constitution. That's in the 12th Amendment, which the 12th Amendment was passed not long after the Constitution was ratified. So that could be interesting. I don't think Trump will pick Rubio. I'm not sure who Trump will pick. We could probably do a vice presidential sweepstakes at some point, an episode on that. I would have picked Kristi Noem for a while, but considering she just admitted to killing her dog, or killing a dog 20 years ago, that's probably done. She's probably not going to be picked, because I don't think people are going to vote for that. I wouldn't base my vote based on whether someone killed their dog, but I would think most people do, considering that's just how our politics go, which is unfortunate, but that's just the state of the country. Okay, so I also wanted to talk about inflation. The inflation report came out. We saw inflation go down slightly. It's at 3.4%. It was 3.5% in March. So it's gone down by a whole 1.1% over the year. Prices in March rose, I believe it was 0.3%. So not really a big surprise. I said inflation would be about the same. I predicted it would be a bit higher. It turned out to be a bit lower. It's probably going to stay at around 3%, maybe drift just under 3% by the end of the year. But this is going to be a huge problem for the Biden administration. If they cannot get inflation down to 2% by the election, which I don't think anyone is predicting they will, it's going to be a big problem for them. Although the damage has kind of been done, I don't necessarily think, even if inflation gets to 2% or even 1% by the election, it's going to help him. So at this point, it's about damage mitigation for Biden. I also want to mention the presidential debates that are coming up. So normally the presidential debates happen in the fall. The Commission of Presidential Debates, or Commission on Presidential Debates, whatever they call themselves, it manages the electoral debates for the general election. They've been doing that since Nixon and Kennedy debated way back in 1960. They have done it ever since. and there's been some turbulence in recent years because the Republican Party did not want their candidate to debate, although Trump has debated. So Trump and Biden agreed to a debate on the 27th of June. So that's when they're going to be debating. That's much earlier. They're not even going to be the official nominees in June, which is kind of bizarre. So it's really unusual. There will also be a debate on September the 10th. I know CNN is going to do the first one. I'm not sure, but ABC might be doing the next one. And I think Fox wants to do a debate too. Trump agreed to do it with Fox, but Biden hasn't signed on yet. Trump seems to be willing to debate anybody, anywhere, and he said that, while Biden has been a bit more cautious. So Trump gave up his leverage. He said, like, oh, I'll be willing to debate Biden anywhere, anytime, which was stupid because then he has no leverage. If you say you're willing to do anything, anytime, then it's up to your opponent to decide, because you reject, then you're going to be going back on your promise. So I would look forward to that. And the next debates, there will be more debates probably. I think both parties have said that. So, all right. Next, we're going to talk about Bob Menendez's trial. Now, this isn't a huge deal. This hasn't gotten really national news because it's not really national news, and it would be if it wasn't for the Trump trial. So Bob Menendez is a senator from New Jersey. I know several friends from New Jersey. They did jury selection this past week, and the jury was seated on Wednesday. And he had a trial back in 2017. He was taking bribes from wealthy Florida doctor back then. He was accused of that, and there was a hung jury. He accused the jury of racism, which, of course, here's the playbook. If you're ever a minority and you are accused of something, always use the racism card. It always seems to work. I guess in this case, and in that case, it did. So they have the receipts, and it's an 18, and the pictures of the current charges, and it's an 18-count indictment. He's accused of bribery, obstruction of justice, and acting as a foreign agent. And he was on the Senate Foreign Relations Committee. So he was a really high-ranking member. So Rep. Andy Kim, who's a congressman from New Jersey, will probably get the nomination to be the senator. Bob Menendez is not running for re-election. He's up for re-election this year. The trial could last a few weeks. 63% of people in New Jersey say he should step down, and 75% of New Jersey citizens believe the charges were true. So, the trial is being tried in New York because it's a federal case, and also I found this interesting for anybody who doesn't like New Jersey. They asked the jury members, if you're from New Jersey, are you more likely to break the law? That's what they had to ask the jury, so I thought that was super interesting. I wanted to mention that. So the jury was seated, so they did some, let's see, the big thing is a culture question. So Bob Menendez is saying, as he was caught with $486,000 of cash, 2 kilogram gold bars, 11 1-ounce bars in his house. And he was saying it was cultural. His family always does that as a matter of culture, keep not trusting banks, which I would say is suspicious, but whatever. So that's what he's being accused of. He's saying it's cultural. This will probably, I think Menendez is done. I do, without seeing the evidence, of which there seems to be a lot, because there's pictures of this. I don't know anyone who would have $486,000 in it just laying around. I think John Betterman put this right when he said like, that's not normal. That's basically what he said. He made some joke, and he was saying it's not normal, and it really isn't. So as I said, he resigned as Senate Relations Foreign Chair. He's not running again this year. If he's convicted of a crime, he'll almost certainly be expelled. And if he is expelled, then Phil Murphy there won't be a special election because the election is happening to fill the 6-year term anyway. Phil Murphy, who's the governor, will pick another Democrat. Who that could be, who nobody knows. Obviously, this is a couple steps down the road. He will probably pick Andy Kim, I would think, or maybe some other caretaker senator. Anyway, This could end up in another hung jury. If it's hung jury or he's acquitted, Bob Menendez isn't going anywhere. He's going to stay as a senator until his term is up. And he might even try to run as an independent, which, if that happens, that would be a huge disaster for the Democrats, because that would split the vote between him, the Democrat, and the Republican, and that might lead to a Republican winning, because Republicans can get between 35 to 40% of the vote in New Jersey, which might be enough if Menendez can siphon enough votes off the Democrats. So if I was a Democratic strategist, I'd be like, you need to get rid of Menendez as soon as possible. Many people have already called on him to resign, including Cory Booker, who's the other senator from New Jersey, but he is not willing to go. So that's the news for the week. I do want to talk a little bit more about Michael Cohen. I have some things in my notes here. Michael Cohen in 2018 pled guilty to federal charges related to the payment and lying to Congress. He also helped push the Russia collusion narrative in 2019. So he's lied under oath. He's clearly a liar. I'm kind of with the Trump team on this one. I think that he can't be trusted. So I'm not often on Trump's side, but with that I'll have to agree. This probably won't be the case that brings Trump down. All right. So let me think about a little bit more if there's anything else I'd like to say. I do want to talk a bit more about the election, because as I've said, elections have always interested me. This is going to be probably one of the closest elections of my lifetime. I think the closest election thus far would be 2016, possibly, maybe 2020, because I wasn't alive in the 2000 election. So this is going to be a really close election. I do think the only way that Trump is going to accept being defeated is if it's with a wide margin, and I don't think that's going to happen. So I think the only outcomes are going to be a narrow Trump victory or a narrow Biden victory. A narrow Trump victory would probably be more peaceful, because the Democrats they have denied elections before, and I think there would be election denial floating around from on the left side. But if we see election denial if we see Biden win, then we're definitely going to see election denial on the right side. It's just, the thing is, if you lose an election twice, can you really say it was stolen? If you lost twice, what's the chances it's stolen twice? And also, I'm sure there's people listening to this podcast who believe the election was stolen. I'll say this right now: I do not think it was stolen. I don't think there's enough evidence. All the evidence that's ever been shown to me has been weak. I think one of the weakest ones was in Arizona. They said more people voted than were registered, and that's not true. Turnout was 90%, but it wasn't 110%. If there's people out there who, I'm sure there is, who don't believe the election was stolen, I do want people to think about it from the other perspective. If the election was stolen, then that does mean we don't live in a democracy anymore, which is very scary. That's not something we would want to see. And that's what about a third of the country believes. And I'm sure there's people who are listening to this right now do believe that. So hopefully that is not the case. And hopefully this will be a secure and safe election. And there will probably be less mail-in voting. One of my friends at school, he and I talk about this stuff all the time. He does think we're going to get a result sooner than last time. I think we got it on Friday or Saturday. So that was the 8th or the 9th, I think. Maybe it wasn't that late. Maybe it was the 7th. So we're probably not going to get a result super late. We're not going to have to wait till Saturday. I think we'll have a result Wednesday or Thursday at the latest. Unless we see something where it's Bush v. Gore, where it's super close, which might be the case. I think it could come down to one or two electoral votes. There's a district in Nebraska, and then there's a district in Maine. So they as I said earlier, they do siphon off their votes, or they do segregate their votes based on congressional district or electoral votes. So it's important that the candidates reach there, because Nebraska is a deep red state, but it's not. The 2nd congressional district is not a deep red. In fact, Biden won it in 2020. So, and same thing in Maine, where the reverse is true. So if they both got rid of their systems, which the states have been talking about scrapping it, it wouldn't change anything because it would be one each. But in Maine, I think it's also the second congressional district. I think it might be the first. Actually, I think it's the first district where it's deep red, or it's not even deep red. It's leans toward Republicans, and Trump has won, I think, both times in 2016, 2020. So if he wins again, if he wins that district, even though Biden wins the whole state, Trump would still get one electoral vote, and Biden would get the other, I think, 3. So that's super important. Looking ahead to this coming week, we will hear more about the Trump trial. I promise this will not be something we talk about all the time, every day, or every show, because it can be a little exhausting. Same with the war in Gaza. I don't want to talk about that every single day. Not that those two aren't important, because they really are. It's just, it can be exhausting to some people. Some people don't like to talk about that, including myself. I think that's really sad, and I do hope there is, at least with the Gaza situation, that there is peace sooner rather than later. Anyway, as I said, we're also going to be looking ahead toward we're going to find out more news on the debates. Hopefully, we're also going to get a conclusion to the trial. We will probably not get a jury decision yet. But remember, if the jury finds him guilty, then Trump has to be sentenced. And who knows how long that could be. I don't know if it's the jury that sentences or the judge. It's probably the judge. And I would say the judge has been pretty lenient to Trump so far. The last 2 times, the judge could have thrown Trump in jail for violating the gag order. And he didn't. Instead, he fined him $9,000 because there were 9 separate violations, and $1,000 was the maximum possible penalty. So the judge has been lenient. He might just put him on probation. Now, this was something I'll say this that one of my friends found really, really funny. What if Trump went to prison, then one of his sons bought the prison, and then, like, if it was a private prison, and then they flooded the prison with people. And then what they do is they start releasing people early because, we have too many people in the prison. And then, we got to release Trump because Trump is nonviolent and there's too many other violent people in this prison. So Trump gets released and then he's free. So I don't know if that would actually work, but that would certainly be pretty funny. He'd probably just move him because I think it would be a federal prison. Or no, I think it's New York. Is it New York? Yeah, it's New York charges. So he would just, or he could go to prison in one of the other trials. So maybe not. But that would be really funny. They had to release him on early release because they didn't have enough room. Anyway, that would look a little suspicious though if Eric or Don bought one of the prisons that Trump was staying in. All right, anyway, I want to thank you all for joining me on this episode. I do enjoy doing this, and I hope you enjoy watching. I got a lot to learn. I really am thankful for you tuning in, and I hope to see you next week on Monday, May the 27th for Memorial Day. There will be an episode on Memorial Day. So have a great Memorial Day weekend.